Look into this dark, unforgiving glass eye, the mesh of the microphone. Tell it your deepest thoughts, hopes, fears, and desires. We will take these emotions, turn them, and feed them back to you, for we have goals, goals that your feelings will assist. This is how we rule, from the shadows, playing your emotions like puppet strings. We lead you to destinations that we have prepared, and you willingly oblige, thinking these decisions to be your own. When you do as we wish, we reward you, and when you go against us, we punish you. In a million subtle ways, we influence your supposedly free choice. By this method, we rule over a population convinced that they are the masters of their own destiny. Welcome to the Empire of Lies.
Yes, welcome indeed to the first official episode of the Empire of Lies. Now, we have had some lead-up episodes. We had a full stream and then a test episode even earlier than that. And you guys are here. You know what this is about. This is the launch of mine and Newsfist, who will be on here in a moment. This is our deep dive series that will last at least the next 6 months of Thursdays, discussing and breaking down for you one nugget at a time, the age of PsyOps, why we are where we are, exactly what it means, and where it came from. The goal of this series is not necessarily just to have a good time, but it's to provide a library of documentation about the building blocks of not just what we call the anti-white narrative, but the building blocks that led up to it, even in the early 1900s, the things that shaped propaganda, the things that shaped how we believe things, how we relate to each other, and specifically how that's been shifted and changed into a user interface for people with their hands on the levers to make the masses think and feel whatever they want. So let's go ahead and bring out my man, Newsfist.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the first episode of Empire of Lies. It's great to be here. I hope you like our new the blue octopus.
Thanks not just because of the funny Greta Thunberg thing recently, but we always like the octopus or the squid or the kraken as a sort of a sign of manipulation from the shadows or the depths. And even old academic agent, his model he likes instead of the cathedral is the octopus. So that's a little salute to old Dr. Nemo Panini.
I prefer to think of it as the gigapus, actually.
Oh, the gigapus, yes,
because it's got like a thousand tentacles, Yeah.
So we'd like to have a good time on this stream series. There will be a little bit of humor, but we're going to keep it mostly dry, mostly straightforward, because this is mostly going to be educational, and it's going to be enlightening, hopefully, for those of you that are interested in learning where all this came from and why we live in such a weird psyop hellscape. So this educational material will hopefully last for at least the next 6 months of Thursdays, like I said. My man, I forgot it's mirrored. My man Newsfist over here is going to be the primary researcher and deliverer. So I'm here as the co-host for this stream series, even though it's on my channel. And this is going to be a short stream series. The bulk of the content is going to be only between 50 minutes and an hour each episode. So it's not going to be a long, boring episode. It's going to be packed with material, our commentary, and hopefully you will enjoy it. And eventually we're going to have a wonderful library that maybe even Brant Danger can use for School of the West one day. So won't that be great? So we will be reading and responding to super chats and whatnot, but not during the stream. We're going to save that till the very end. So get your comments and questions in on Entropy, Subscribestar, Cash App, PayPal. I'll even pop up a little shill banner as we get started here, as you can see at the bottom of the screen. Give to me shekels, and I will keep making good content for you guys. And just to help out my buddy Chris over here, I will be sharing the proceeds of the stream with him. So if you really like him, feel free to donate on this show, and I'm splitting it 50-50 with him for all that I bring in for the show, because he does good work on his channel as well. And I really like him. He and I agree on a lot of things. He's got his head in the right place, and he's doing good work over in the UK. So we're going to be splitting the money on this stream series together. So we've got all of that out of the way. So I made a rather catchy meme to advertise the first episode of our stream, and I'm going to pull that up right now. This is what I made for us to advertise our launch episode this week. How this became this. Now, it's going to become more evident as the stream goes on exactly what this image means, but I want you guys to let this sink in, because this is exactly how we got to where we are right now, which will become evident by the end of this stream. So I think that is a pretty good place to hand it over to you, Mr. Fist.
They do call me Mr. Fist. Yeah, so the basic premise that we're going to explore on this stream is the idea that in the sort of boomer truth regime post World War II, advertising was used as a substitute for religion, for other kind of ideas like racial, tribal, familial belonging, nationhood. And these principles were broken down and documented very, very sort of clearly, right, and effectively by mainly Edward Bernays, Freud's. Well, it really started with Freud, right, and the idea that Freud had that men were essentially sort of a bundle of kind of suppressed desires, and then Bernays came along with the idea, and he was like, hey, we could use those suppressed desires to like sell people stuff. And then this sort of like evolved into what most people would recognize as consumerism in like, the 50s and 60s, and the idea that you can essentially replace meaningful belonging sort of symbols like, religion or family with essentially like products. And then this evolved even further into the idea that you could essentially run politics this way, right? That you could sell political symbology, right? Which is fundamentally meaningless, right? Like,
to sum it up, everything became a brand. All your identity became a brand.
Yes. And because we have not really sort of had in the West a functional democracy for quite some time.
Brand.
What sorry, go on.
No, I popped up the meme and said, brand, get it?
Yeah, exactly. Because we have not
I interrupted. Go ahead, sorry.
Because we've not really had a functional democracy for quite a while. What's basically happened is that these sort of positions, these political positions, have been sold to people, right, as a substitute for belonging. And this has bled into literally every single part of Western society, into things like ersatz religion, right, into things like ersatz political positions, into activism, into all this. It's become an incredibly powerful technology. Now, but something very important has changed recently. Right, let me go to my notes. Okay. So the thing that stepped into the void as the post-war religion and family began to decline was known as consumerism, but really it's advertising is what it really comes down to, right? Consumerism is just a word for stuff that is driven by advertising, right? A toaster is just a thing that cooks your bread, right? Unless you create a story around it, give people a sense of belonging, a way to signal to their tribe and to their economic status, right? This is why one of the sort of hallmarks of capitalism is this sort of profusion of very, very similar products that signal to different populations, right? So, you could just buy like a normal toaster, or you could buy a Dolce & Gabbana toaster that's, got like all this like nice stuff on it, and you could signal your status and all this kind of like other stuff. Essentially, what has happened is that people's sense of race, nation, and country has been stolen from them and then sold back to them in the form of material goods, simultaneously creating great wealth and making people easier to control as money and the things you can buy with it gains an ever greater psychological hold over them. Now, the premier person who basically detailed this process, if we can switch to the small cam, Liz, is Vance Packard in a book called The Hidden Persuaders. Now, this came out in about like 1957, and it's a great book. I haven't gotten a chance to reread it recently because, goddamn, I've been busy. I'm doing like 4 shows a week now. But essentially, the Hidden Persuaders was sort of the peak sort of revelation of what consumerism had done to America, right? This came out in sort of the era of Mad Men. If you've ever watched Mad Men, when like the sort of the New York advertising scene, like, their power seemed limitless, essentially, right? Is there anything we cannot do, right? Famously, Bernays in the 20s, in fact, got women to start smoking. up until that point, smoking was not considered something that women should do. So Bernays basically consulted a psychiatrist who then told him that for women, a cigarette was a substitute for a penis. I mean, okay. And then he hit on the idea that you could sell women smoking if you told them it was about freedom. I don't know why he needed a psychiatrist to fucking like tell him this. Quite frankly, if you wanted to sell anything to an American, I would say sell it. Say this is about freedom, right? Like, you know, it's the MAGA thing. It's look, it works on the British as well, right? Okay, you know, like the white West. I would actually argue that the more unfree people get, the more you can probably sell them stuff based on the idea that, you know, instead of actual freedom, right, you can buy freedom in this product. So he hired a bunch of like young women, debutantes, and got them to hide cigarettes under their, you know, in their garter belts. And in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade, I believe it was, right, at a signal, they all whipped out their cigarettes and started smoking. And Bernays had like ins with all of the press, oy vey, and they all ran these stories calling this a momentous moment of female liberation, torches of freedom. They were called, right? And surprise, surprise, through doing this, they managed to get women to start smoking. And I think this kind of shit basically went to their heads, and the advertisers started thinking they could do basically anything, right? Now, we're going to go into some of the basic principles behind Packard's vision, right? Well, this is really Bernays' vision, but Packard sort of condensed it down, right? So the basic ideas behind consumer motivational research. Let's also not forget there was like a ton of psychological research backing this kind of stuff. All these focus groups, all of these like psychologists, they're like basically trying to find out how to like fuck people over so they could like sell them stuff. And what they came up with is that through consumer motivational research and other psychological techniques, including depth psychology and subliminal messaging, by advertisers and politicians to manipulate expectations and induce desire for products and candidates. So this very, very clearly bled over into the political realm very, very quickly as well, right? So the first is emotional security, right? You want to promise comfort, happiness, security, and no bad feelings. The reassurance of worth, like the L'Oreal thing. You know, you're worth it, right? You should have it. And once you have it, you can symbolize to the people around you that you have it and that you're worth it. Honestly, the L'Oreal campaign is sort of the most classic sort of like example of this. And anyone who can't afford it obviously are worth less because they don't have it and they're obviously not worth it. This leads into ego gratification, another tactic that they use a lot. Basically saying, oh, you know, you're a smart consumer for buying this. You made the clever deal. You know, you're ahead of the pack. Creative outlets. This goes into the Betty Crocker thing, which is a very, very interesting story about how when Betty Crocker originally made like the cake mix, right, a lot of women wouldn't buy it. And they went to a psychologist and they were like, well, you know, what can we do? Psychologist basically said, get women to crack an egg into it. The egg had no effect on the recipe, but because the women felt like they were contributing to the recipe, all of a sudden it sold really, really well. Love objects. You know, we all need something to love. Even if we don't have love, if you can sell ersatz love or ersatz belonging, a sense of power. Many products are presented as symbols of power. The torches of freedom, of course, being like an excellent example of this, you know, right? Like by doing this thing, by having this product, by voting this way, I'm taking back my power. This is a principle that is very, very common still in activist advertising today, right? You have all these powerful, powerless people on the left who are like, oh, I'm going out in my pussy hat and I am, you know, representing my power. No, you're not. You're not representing your power at all. You're just being sucked in by this thing. Then you have roots, the idea that, you know, you appeal to like a large culture, old sort of McDonald's ads, Pizza Hut ads. I mean, look, fucking basically any commercial before the revolution that was aimed at whites did this. You know what I mean, right? It would show like family, Americana, apple pie, you know, you belong, right? Basically, you know, you're part of your tribe, right? And immortality. This is very, very common in cosmetics and stuff like that, but also in politics as well. You know, you can live forever through this product. You can live a longer life, a healthier life. Now, so those are basically, is that 7 principles? It's all the principles. Okay, basically, right? Now, if we let's see, let's go back to the cover. Right. So now, the destruction of the family and the replacement with material goods. And I'm not saying that consumerism hasn't done some good things for society. It's not like post-World War II, the the material wealth of the West did not go up. But the idea in most people's minds is that in order for material wealth to go up, it must have been done in this way. And that's not really, really true. The destruction of the family and the replacement with material goods is known in communism as alienation, right? I'm not a big fan of communism, but sometimes their way of framing stuff is quite useful. Communist concept of alienation is where the worker is alienated from his work. But it could also be described as the removal of family from their land, from their tradition. And this is essentially what happened basically to everyone starting in post-World War II and
like
now
I've been talking about on my channel for 5 years, it was the being stripped of God and being stripped of ethnic identity as well, because those things were natural supports, natural community things that have been stripped and replaced with a new God, which is why I titled our first episode The Boomer God, is because the boomers were the first ones to grow up entirely with this stuff fully in place as the primary American identity.
Yeah. So the thing about controlling a society this way is that it's fought back against nationalism. It fought back against tribal groupings. We now see it in the sort of psychotic policy of racism, right? Which is now expanded so far that to even sort of recognize that you have a certain ancestry or you are bound to a certain land, as long as if you're white, of course, if you're any other race, you can totally do that stuff, is racist, because it's a fight against nationalism, because the controllers, they are fundamentally scared of tightly knit national groups, because they're very, very hard to push around, right? They all help each other. They all have like the same customs. They have the same history. They are, basically like a group, and they don't want that, right? What they want is synthetic groups that are bound by ideologies that they create. And once you've got a bunch of these groups, if you control the framing behind them, you can just change the framing and, everything will be fine. Now,
it's like the NPC meme with the microchip,
yes,
like taking out Ukraine, putting in the Palestine-Israel thing, or taking out George Floyd, putting in the COVID stuff. Like, it's exactly like that. That's what we're talking about.
Yes, exactly. And note how the framing doesn't have to make any real sense at all. Okay, so Russia was bad because Ukraine was like a small country, right? And they invaded a small country. Palestine is bad, but the things are completely reversed, right? Like, the idea is to have the simplest ideas possible, right? It's basically like selling crayons to children. And there's this weird sort of like feedback sort of thing where, as they make the people dumber, right, they then blame those very same people for their stupidity, right? Like, it's like, oh, well, you're so dumb now. Well, what else can we do? Dude, you made them stupid, right? You systematically undermined any sense of identity. You destroyed the education system. You filled it with brainwashing and all this kind of stuff, because you were fundamentally worried that anyone smart and any kind of like group that bound together might see your hideous plan and potentially, revolt against you. And now that you also see that by doing this, they also manage to sort of control access to power, because their nepotism is absolutely favored, right?
And I'd like to point out here that another attack on the Western kind, on white people, is our staunch adherence to merit-based success and merit-based rewards and punishment via a natural racial or ethnic hierarchy in Western countries. That's why you have seen the complete removal of meritocracy replaced with this fake you could call it corporate labeling or corporate branding, but whatever, pick your right-wing pronoun, like whether you want to call it anti-white stuff or corporate stuff or globalist stuff. That's why they want to promote based on villain signaling. They want to promote based on who can check the right non-white box, who can check the right non-Christian or non-heterosexual box. That has replaced the meritocratic process, which on top of the stupefaction that this has, that's what leads to the competency crisis. That's what leads to competent people that otherwise would succeed in our biospiritual framework of meritocracy being pushed to the side. That's why you see so many competent men, white men, frustrated. They have nowhere to go. They have nothing to reward them.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And this is by design, right? Like the end game is clearly subjugation, and for a while it seemed to be working pretty well, right? The only problem, of course, with alienation is that it causes things like the rise of like unions, the formation of sort of synthetic gatherings of people. And of course, because this entire system is backed by usury, because it is backed by fiat money that is basically printed out of nowhere, you always have this problem that inflation keeps rising, right? And the biggest problem with inflation, the biggest thing, they say it drives inflation, but really it catches up to inflation, is wages, right? Because if people are, they're being paid a certain amount and then their money declines in value and they've got a union, they all get together and they're like, hey, we want more fucking money, right? Now the economists, they say, oh, well, this drives inflation. No, it doesn't. Printing fucking money out of nothing is what drives inflation. It is the only thing that drives inflation. But as long as you can keep people on a starvation wage, you can mitigate the worst effects of this inflation. Of course, the rich, who get the new money first, they get to buy stuff at the old price, right? So, you print $1 billion out of thin air, right? You get to buy all the stuff at the price that it currently is. But after you've bought it, the price goes up because it's more scarce. And then other people further down the line, they have to buy it at the raised price. This is known as the Cantillon effect. If anyone is interested, it's quite, Now, to move on to the revolution, right? Which is, it's basically happened at this point. We are now living in the post-revolutionary society. That's why you can look back across the chasm and be like, wow, stuff used to be really different back then. Why is that? It's because we had a revolution. It was not quite as bloody as some, and it took a bit longer, but it is a revolution nonetheless. And looking back, it is very, very clear that both BLM and COVID were part of this revolution. And we have noticed since BLM a very, very profound shift, although it's been going on for a while, right? The tactics that were being used to keep the white population sort of enamored by consumerism have now shifted onto minority populations. So now you see very, very clearly it is the minorities who belong. It is the minorities who are worth it. It is the minorities that have representation. It is the minorities that have a backstory, indeed, to such a ridiculous extent that all
it's
the
like if you're
people,
non-white and you're non-hetero and you're non-Christian, then you matter. Then your boxes that you can check matters. If you are white or heterosexual or Christian, then they don't, and you are to be punished.
Correct. But more importantly, you are to be deprived of even a sense of worth. I don't know, maybe you could go out and buy some Bud Light and express yourself. It's ridiculous. Like there is a drive, it seems, to literally remove all of the supports that white society post World War II have. It's very, very, very weird. If you're a minority, you can, be successful. You have a place, signal your wealth. But all goods now consumed by whites are supposed to signal weakness and failure. Whites are not supposed to dream of a future or a family. If they gain success, it was not off their own back. There is no L'Oreal, you're worth it, you deserve it messaging. It's only the opposite. If you're white and you got it, you obviously got it through some shady means. You're clearly not worth it, etc., etc.
Or specifically in the case that we experience now, is you got it by harming or stealing from non-whites.
Oh, exactly. You didn't earn it. You stole it. So imagine if L'Oreal came out and was like, instead of like you're worth it, it's like you stole it, right? That thing that you bought, that L'Oreal you bought, you should give it to a poor black trans astronaut or something like that. It's basically that, right? Deprived of a sense of race, land, family, and religion, the white population is, in a sense, losing the last comfort that it had under consumer capitalism, which was a refuge in brands, right? And I'm a Gen Xer. I remember this very, very clearly. Synthetic
So am I.
subcultures. I was big into the goth scene, and that that was how you built your identity. You didn't build it based on your family. You didn't build it based on like where you grew up. You didn't build it on it was these synthetic sort of, again,
you built it on either NASCAR or Lost Boys.
yeah, and the manufacturing sector were happy through stuff like Hot Topic, for example, to sell you these products that would allow you to demonstrate your allegiance to a certain group. You know what I mean, right? Like, and this is basically so the refuge in brands was basically sort of the last sort of white refuge, right? And this is now all of these things, consumption, media, games, movies, all of this stuff, right, are now being made available, or not even available, just sort of targeted at the minority population, while at the same time,
I'd like to point out it's not minority. It just means non-white, because non-whites are the majority, not the minority.
Yes, you're right. The non-white population. Now, this is the reason, in my humble opinion, why many whites are now finding even media from the past unbearable. You talked about this years on that great walking video you did, which not only resonated with me, but with a bunch of other people, because I had been mulling over why a lot of the stuff, the nostalgia doesn't work anymore on me. It does not take me away from the present to a happier place. The way I sort of thought about it is like, imagine, your parents take you on a drive to Disneyland. And
I'll share the link to that short morning walk in the chat here for everybody.
Yes. And on the way to this drive to Disneyland, you get stopped and robbed and beaten and raped. And then, you finally get to Disneyland, but it's not really very good. And, when you look back at the time, you felt very optimistic. Oh, we're going to Disneyland. But now, seeing the destination, of course, all these memories are not really, really doing it for you.
Yeah. It's like the meme with the soldiers getting ready to go to D-Day, looking at the picture of the wife in the helmet, but it's like a child drag queen.
Exactly. And this is the reason why many whites are now finding even media from the past unbearable, not just because the comforts of consumerism have been removed, but because it reveals that it was always a lie.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot find ultimate transcendental meaning in a handbag or a car. I mean, I'm sure some people really love working on cars. That's probably a bad example, but a car is not, a handbag, a consumer object is not transcendental, right? It won't give you sort of like fundamental transcendental meaning. And the extent that you could find solace in these things, such as media, it is revealed that it was always a manipulation to distract you from religion, to distract you from your race, to distract you from having children and settling down, and most of all, to distract you from the people who were ruining society.
Yep.
And then I've got a conclusion here. But being deprived of this crutch of consumerism may ultimately be a good thing. We should use material objects, not attach to them mythical stories. What a product says about you is that you bought it. Nothing more, nothing less. There are more meaningful and important beliefs and signifiers that people can use to lead meaningful lives: religion, race, culture, family. And it's the stories around these things that must animate our people going forward, because consumerism has and always will be suspect and co-opted. After all, you can't take it with you when you die. And if you have no children, you can't even pass forward anything material.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm out of material now.
The thing that I wanted to touch on here, and that was perfect, by the way. We're at the half-hour mark. That was
okay.
The thing I want to touch on here is what you said earlier about one of the primary evils of all of this is the web of usury that everyone is born into. And the reason why they like that, they like this annihilative framework of identity, is usury requires competitive individuals that have nothing non-material to gain from any action. Because if your entire life, if your entire structure of being is about gaining a leg up in your corporation, getting a bigger house than the other individualists in your subdivision, then you don't have any collective bargaining power. You don't have any ethnic, religious, racial, or otherwise unity based on anything. Because if everyone is just a competitive individual trying to get more money or more villain signaling points within their corporation to get a leg up or a promotion within the bureaucracy, then there is no unity. There's no way to resist the people that already hold all the cards and have all the chips. You can't take the house. Because if you go to a casino, right, and all you have is your few dollars that you get excess every week to go put in the slot machine, you're never going to take the house. They lie to you. They ensnare you. They ensorcel you with all of these material things, and they just bleed you dry, and you have no collective bargaining power against it. And this is why I say that the anti-white narrative, the consumer corporatism, the globalism, and all this stuff, it all sort of dovetails together to create this global usury network where they don't want people to be a people. They want people to be persons of no group, persons of nothing, no identity to you at all, other than check boxes they can use for their propaganda machine, for their sales marketing, to check off boxes for DIE, for ESG scores. That's all that you are allowed to have for your identity. What they assign to you, the boxes and the checklist they create for you, because then you are as much a part of the group or an individual as they dictate to you. Therefore, you are just a single individual integer in their global usury equation. And I think that is where they want us all to be.
Yeah, you are basically the perfect consumer, right? And DEI is a very, very interesting way of doing this, right? So intersectionality, sort of by definition, you can, basically be an individual by saying that you belong to all of these different identity groups, but then these identity groups can either accept you or reject you. And it's very, very interesting to notice that this is one of the reasons why the modern controllers have rejected old school leftist Marxism based on class, right? Because class is a way that people can organize. They make unions, they demand better conditions, and this was very, very successful, right? Like, I know a lot of people like crap on Marxism, but look, unions have done arguably more to improve the working standards of people than anything else, right? Power does not relent without a demand. I know that's a very leftist thing to say, but again, it's pretty much true, right? Particularly,
well, I don't like to use leftist and rightist. Let's just say it is a very typically that what you just said is associated with consumerism and corporatism, but that doesn't make it any less true for what we're talking about.
Yes, well, that's precisely my point. I know a lot of people who play this game, and they're like, oh, anything the leftists say is untrue. Anything the rightists say, no. Look, you gotta look into these things, right? And the sort of old school sort of like lefty thing of like let's form a union, let's agitate for better conditions. No. Sure, it can go too far. Anything can go too far, right? Like by definition. But to deny that this impulse to collectivize and to demand better conditions is stupid. I mean, look, what they want are individuals, right? They want people who are completely shorn from their family, from their identity, from their past, from their language, from literally everything. They want essentially these free floating, atomized individuals. Sorry, go on.
Because an individual without collective strength or collective bargaining power is impossible, finds it impossible to defend himself against collective attack. And this is why in the Go Free method, we talk about this a lot. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this entire series with you, is you understand that and intuit that, and you like the Go Free book that I had you read anyway. Like, this is what we're talking about. This is why my tagline for the last year and a half or two has been, to recapture our destiny, we must build community. To heal and to protect ourselves against what's being done to us, we have to have unity. We have to have collective bargaining power. We have to collectively resist what is being done to us, because an individual cannot resist collective might. Like, it doesn't matter how great of a soldier or how wonderful of a martial artist you are, you can't defeat 800 peasants with longbows. It's just not going to happen. Or 50 men with machine guns. It doesn't matter how great you are. If you're outnumbered and you are against a powerful, organized collective, and you have no network, you have no strength in numbers, you have no organization, then you're going to fail. And this is why I think at the core of this, the people who put all of this into place and then took control of it, they knew exactly what they were doing, because people like Bernays and others, they wrote exactly about how you can take an individual from a community, shape their mind to want to be better than their community and rise above them by buying this product or doing this activity like smoking a cigarette to be free or whatever. This is how civil rights was sold to us. This is how women voting was sold to us. Voting was sold to us originally before there even was a United States. Like, this is how these things were pitched to us. It was a trick. It was a bait and switch. You want freedom and empowerment? Oh, well, that's a trick. We're giving you the opposite of both of those things by stripping your collective unity from you that you naturally had and replacing it with what we're giving you.
Yeah, exactly. They took from you the real things and they sold you the ersatz in return, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got fake belonging, you got fake culture, you got fake music, fake land, fake housing, fake children, everything. You know what I mean, right? And it seems that there is just a relentless attack on just anything that, and this is the thing as well, right? I am absolutely sure that although at the moment, right, the minorities are being sold this exact same thing, it too will pass, right? At a certain point, their collectivism will also become, distasteful to the regime, and they will move on. I don't know like what will happen then. Maybe they'll pivot back to the whites, or maybe they'll develop some other kind of like thing based on
we can already see it happening right now. Like in the Go Free community, we're already talking about how they're shifting gears with the anti-white narrative, because as you've been told, or as you've seen in media for the last 5 to 10 years, well, who's an honorary white? All these high-performing Asians, certain Iranians, certain Arabs. Like, and then when you see certain black people in America, black Americans like Thomas Sowell, or the honorable judge that sits on the Supreme Court right now, what do they call him? They call him white. They say he's acting white. Like, this is, of course, this is obviously about Western kind. It's about Western people. But this narrative, you've seen how they can just unplug one chip, put in another, and they'll say, oh, you remember how we told you guys to hate all white people yesterday? Well, see, this group of Asians, they're the new white. Let's hate them and destroy them too. And everybody has to behave. They have to do this because it's in the equation that they've built for everyone. And unless we can break this narrative with collective strength, with unified resistance, then this cycle is going to continue until the wheels fall off of everything.
Yeah.
And speaking of, can we go back to the other view and you bring up a part of the article I'd like to read to everybody?
Yes, absolutely. Hang on a second. Wait, let me
I'd like to read section 3. So if you can scroll down to section 3, I'd like to read this to everyone.
You mean further down, or?
Yeah, it's tactic number 3.
Tactic number 3.
Yeah, I want to read this one.
Ego gratification?
No, its heading is actually tactic number 3.
Tactic number 3. Right.
Yeah.
Sorry about this.
That's okay.
Tactic number 2. Tactic number 3. Here we go.
Yeah. I'm going to read this to everybody because I want you to hear this. Villages are not, of course, perfect places. There are all sorts of feuds and fault lines to be negotiated. Notwithstanding, the primary function of the village is to provide a context within which a culture of community can proliferate and prevail. Such a culture is created through practices of hospitality and cooperation. Consumerism abjures such cooperation since it runs contrary to its principles. Remember what I said earlier about getting people to compete? To borrow from Alfie Kohn, author of No Contest, The rule of consumerism, which promotes competition over cooperation. For me to win, you must lose. This is exactly what I was mentioning earlier. Last paragraph here. Hidden persuaders understand the importance of feeding the competitive urge, not only between individuals, but also to promote a sense of competition within us. The pursuit of perfection translates into the annual changing of our iPhone. It explains why en masse we have passively accepted that these days nearly everything we purchase has built-in obsolescence with a couple of years. We rationalize it as the price and pace of progress. Where have we heard that before, gang? Our pursuit of perfection has fueled a cult of anti-aging, fear of death, and an active hostility towards human fallibility and vulnerability. Trust the experts, they can't be wrong. This has translated into multi-billion-dollar pharmacology and healthcare industries aimed at winning the battle against finite humanity and an exoneration of responsibility to care for those who don't or can't measure up to the standard of perfection. Now, the reason I wanted to point to this is for this last paragraph here. The reason that I interjected a couple of things was to get you to think along the lines I want you to think in for this last sentence. Look at that. To care for those who don't measure up to the standards of perfection. Who doesn't measure up to the standards of perfection? Whites, heterosexuals, Christians, traditionalists. In this empire of lies, they decide what the imperfection is. They decide what progress is. They decide the metric for which line go up, and line must always go up. And if you don't fit that, guess what? You're not included. You're brushed away. You're punished.
And might I just add how incredibly unchristian this view is, right?
Yeah.
The Christian view is that we are all flawed, right? You don't have to like beat yourself up about it like the way the Catholics do, right? But you need to accept, right, that there are flaws in everyone, right? This is supposed to be the goal in Orthodox Christianity, is that you, by acting more godly, you move closer to God. It's an unattainable goal, right? But by doing so, you become a better person, right? You're always changing. There is always the possibility of redemption. This is just the most horrible kind of like interpretation that I can possibly imagine. And I think this is one of the reasons why the boomers wound up the way that they did.
Yes, exactly.
Not giving any material wealth to their children, kicking all their kids out at the age of 18. Like just, this pursuit of perfection in their children and other people.
It's why mine and your generation, Gen X, the immediately after the boomers, we could tell something was wrong.
Yes.
Why do you think Gen X has the stereotype of being just screw it all, I don't care, I'm an individual, I'm not like anybody else? Because their own families, their own communities, or should I say lack of communities, going all the way back to the 60s and 70s, we were raised being able to tell something was wrong. That we were like, our own parents were like, bootstraps. Oh, you can drive now at 15. You better start looking for a job and a place to live because I don't want to pay for you anymore. You got to go make your own way because I want a yacht and I want a fat retirement. I want to have a condo and a timeshare. Get out, son and daughter. Go fend for yourselves. This is absolutely satanic, psychotic behavior that human beings, especially Western kind, never behaved like until the mid to late 1900s.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, just the idea that you should relinquish family continuity. And unironically, right, this really was not driven home to me until I came to the UK and I met a bunch of like, Bangladeshis and Indians and Pakistanis. The very Desi is the term, right? Traditional, right?
Yeah.
And they all have these incredibly large extended families, right? They don't kick their kids out at like 18, right? I mean, okay, there are some downsides, they're often into sort of arranged marriages and it can be very, very strict and stuff like that. But
that's not necessarily a bad thing because
here in the mountain hollers,
we sort of do that now too. Like we have large family clans out here in the hills. People talk at church, people talk at work, trying to set up their sons and daughters with other sons and daughters of families they like. I know it's not the same as like Hindu arranged marriages, but it's the same principle. And that's why I think you have a lot more cultural cohesion. And in rural areas like where I live, we naturally can resist a lot of this anti-white stuff, a lot of this anti-Christian stuff, because we have not been fully stripped of that stuff yet.
But you never see Desi homeless, right? You never see them, on the street corners, begging for money to get crack and heroin. You know what I mean, right? Like they are, their clan takes care of them, right? And that is their culture, and that is celebrated. Whites not allowed. You're not allowed. It's a terrible thing. I don't think that. I mean, again, this is a bit of a black pill, but inside the black pill is a white pill. Consumerism was always a comfortable lie, but while it was going on, you could sort of bask in it, and although it wasn't real meaning, it was real enough. And now that it has gone, I think many people are turning back to religion, which, I mean, Christianity, not all Christianity is the same, though. Obviously, there's some really, really wacky brands of Christianity out there. And trying to make a sense of belonging. I've seen a big resurgence in people sort of really trying to like value family. I don't know whether it's going to be enough.
We
It's
also see it
certainly
in non-Christian groups as well. Like I talk to
absolutely.
a lot of people that participate in Asatru now, and that are revitalizing more traditional, even older European faiths, like people who worship Odin, people who want to try to find meaning and religious purpose in European mythology. Like my friend Raging Mandrill, who was on our channel, who's on my channel again Monday, he's Odinic, and he and I talk very comfortably Christian to Odinic faith about the same stuff. And so, again, like we talk about, it's not necessarily the structure of government, it's the corruption and how evil it's become. I think you could say the same thing about Christianity, because it's not necessarily about what sect of Christianity it is. If it's become anti-God, anti-white, anti-us, then it doesn't really matter how good it used to be. It works to our detriment now. And unfortunately, you get a lot of anti-whiteism and hilariously, and also tragically, anti-Christian stuff coming from the pulpit these days.
Oh yeah, I mean it's just insane. I mean, if you look what's happened to the Anglican Church as a classic example in the UK. The Anglican Church, the UK Anglican Church, actually got kicked out of the worldwide Anglican community because they were so incredibly paused that the Africans, many of them who are extremely devout. I mean, it's different, over there. A lot of them believe in polygamy, and they're very dancey, and kind of like that whole black church kind of thing. But they are also very, very traditional, right? They do not like the gay. Right? Like,
why do you gay?
go over to Nigeria, right? And try telling them, oh, we're going to have a woman priest now. Oh, we're going to have like a trans priest. We're going to have a gay priest.
That wouldn't happen.
We do not believe this. And this is what I mean, right? These people, they have roots, they have traditions, right? I think that one of the sort of side effects of the increasing diversity is that it has allowed these sort of very, is the term deracinated?
Yes.
Whites who look at other groups and be like,
deracinated means pulled up by the roots or rootless. Yes, that's the correct term to use.
The ausrotten. Right,
ausrotten.
I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Look, you can look at these groups and be like, damn, you guys you have cohesion. You have like a shared identity. You have roots and family and all this. Why don't we have any of that? You know what I mean? Oh, because we're all individuals now. I mean, look, if you want to be an individual, all you got to do is dress the same as us and listen to the same fucking music we do,
and do exactly what we tell everybody else to do.
Exactly. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's like, yeah, hey, young white female, we need you to behave like a hypersexual homosexual man, and be empowered and be your bad boss lady individual self, just like the millions of other white women that were mentally poisoning to do this. Oh, look what a great individual you are. Like, it's
and please don't have any children. Like,
it's
please.
just this, yeah, exactly. It's this spiritually, culturally annihilative force, like the great nihil. It's really dark. And the reason I chose tactic 3 here to go over is this really personifies the why of this topic. They want to come into our communities, our minds, our churches, our spirits, and they want to strip out what we need, what we have built, what resonates with us biospiritually and has for thousands of years, and replace it with a sickness, replace it with an infectious disease, a spiritual mental disease. And that's what anti-whiteism is. That's what all of this usury stuff, manipulative stuff is. It is 5th generational AIDS, 5th generational cancer, and they implant it in us from birth. And that's why the Go Free method is the curative contagion. We say that phrase a lot because, like we were talking about earlier, the unity, the strength that we can have collectively to push back against it, it requires organization. It requires cooperation. And having the right words, the right meme curatives to block the evil things that come at us every day, those spread, again, like a disease, but it's a curative contagion. To sort of like how antibodies can spread from mother to child, that kind of thing. That's what we're doing with this stream series. That's what the Go Free method is all about, is helping our folk in whatever country we live in have the language and the shared strength to resist this stuff together, because none of us can do it alone.
And it requires a shared vision, fundamentally, right? Like, you know, the any kind of vision has been, you know, stripped from whites, and then they're now working very, very busily on even, you know, stripping the past. Shakespeare is going to be black before you know it. You know, Adam Smith will be black. Like all of the, you know, great sort of like, you know, white sort of thinkers from, you know, America. I mean, look at Hamilton.
All of them have been.
Right? I mean, there's down at the train station near me, there's a picture for Hamilton, right? And it's 4 black dudes, right? Like, you know, doing this thing. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Yes, I'm not an American, but I don't believe that Hamilton and Jefferson and Washington were
all wasps. All wasps.
Yeah, I get that. But, you know, look, the BBC basically came out and said, oh, well, you know, it's not really true. But, you know, we got to do it. Well, why? Why have you got to do it, right? Of course, this is never like really answered. You can't really ask the BBC why they do the insane kind of stuff that they do. The global controllers, for a lack of a better term, have deemed it to be so. You know what I mean, right? Like you is about to be replaced. The only thing that really gets me about this whole plan is how incredibly stupid it is. Like, I don't. I mean, I get that, you know, people from Huxley, you know, and all the other UN, you know, horrible people are all like, oh yes, you know, we're gonna have like a, you know, an easily moldable slave class that has like, you know, no roots and no family and no. But do they not see how incredibly dangerous this is, right? Like, not just in terms
I think they don't, because I believe that the bureaucrats and the people who push this for the anti-white oligarchs, the globalist overlords, whatever, the vast majority of people who push this, they really are not very smart. They are just bell curve or worse people that get promoted because of, you know, reverse meritocracy, like we talked about earlier. They are promoted specifically because of this. It's where we get the term bio-Leninism. You know, you invert meritocracy. You promote the worst and the dumbest that are just loyal to the party, and in this case, loyal to anti-whiteism, loyal to the machine or whatever. And this is why you have these people in power doing really dumb, annihilative things, thinking they're doing what's right. And really what they're doing is just knocking the legs out from under everything that functions. And so 2 generations from now, if this keeps up, nothing's going to work. Airports aren't going to work. Logistics isn't going to work. Power stations aren't going to work. We're not going to have the capacity for complex nuclear power systems and all the infrastructure required to get clean, affordable energy to people. And the wheels are just going to come off all of this if this doesn't stop.
And the people who this is known as the competency crisis, by the way. If any of you have not heard this term, this is called the competency crisis, which is as the general level of intelligence and ability decays, all these complex systems start breaking down. You won't have airports, you won't have logistics, you won't have nuclear power, you won't have stuff, will just start breaking. We're already starting to see it. And I think that some of these people, they really seem to imagine that you know, they're going to flee away to like some desert island, or, you know, they're going to, you know, go to New Zealand or whatever, and everything will be fine. But that I think that's stupid. They are going to get eaten alive by their own creation. They are, you know, and I think that a lot of these people, I think you're right, are basically midwits. I mean, you know, that I think it was Orwell who said there are some ideas so stupid that only an intellectual could believe them. Yeah. And I really see that a lot.
That was very prophetic, because that explains almost everyone in power right now.
Exactly. And I think at the heart is a group of ruthless ideologues, truly crazy people. Some of them are religious supremacists, some of them are ethnic supremacists, some of them seem to be like just full-on Satanists, to be perfectly honest. If you look at the people
like the Malthusian death cult people we talk about, all they care about is the destruction of complex systems to depopulate the earth. Some of them are driven by that too.
I mean, I don't think it's too much of a press to say these people are driven by demons. I mean, what would be the functional difference, right? Like you'd be like, oh, you know, we don't believe in demons anymore, but you are driven by this overwhelming desire to literally kill everyone on the planet. Oh yeah, but it's not a demon. Okay, I mean, you know,
Chris, they're the same picture.jpg.
Exactly.
On that note, let's go ahead and clear this and go back to the other view here.
Okay, right. Yes. In Biggin.
There we go. Because that was the last segment that I had prepared for the stream, and we're almost exactly on the 1 hour mark. So let's go ahead. Do you have any closing thoughts about our first official episode?
So I've been trying to think about like not just criticism, but solutions, right? I would really encourage people to seek religion of some kind, right? Seek a meaning outside of the material world, not in a sort of stupid way. Like, you know, don't be all like, oh, if I just meditate, it'll go away. Try and seek what I think Carl Benjamin would call thick concepts. You know what I mean, right? Like thick concepts, like culture, race, belonging. Try and make friends, right, with other people who share your values, and try, I guess, and not be a dick to people. I know sometimes it's hard, but you know, if you come across people, they are going through their own struggles as well. Try not to be a dick. Try and be gentle with them, and perhaps they will come around sooner or later. Remember, everyone's going through their own journey. I know this, you know, sounds, but really, like, it can be hard. And try and, I guess, we need to develop a shared vision, because organizing in a sort of militaristic way is going to get us totally fed posted. So instead, what we need is a common idea, a common frame of reference, an emergent phenomena, to sort of coin the phrase, so that when things happen, everyone who shares that frame of vision will immediately understand like what it means for them, what it means for that vision. And thus you can get a form of coordinated action without needing to actually build, you know, an actual organization, which can then, you know, get shut down.
Yeah. Well, this has been a wonderful stream, and I shared my closing thoughts with that topic 3 and what I had to say about the Go Free method, how it's correct, how the things that I learned from Jason, the things that he's been professing for years, are absolutely correct. And I like this series because it's going to be a sort of intellectual plus educational presentation to talk about how all of this stuff intersects into this annihilative anti-white cancer that digs into all of us. So that was my closing statement. Now, speaking of closing statements, the community seems to really love what we're doing. We have a lot of financial support tonight, and I would like to get to those. I would like to start with my friend, Biospirit of the West, because he sent in a donation before the stream even started for $100. Thank you so much. $100.
$100 dues. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. It's yeah, it warms our soul. Yes.
He says for let's see. Yeah, Biospirit of the West. Where is it? Oh, I forgot. It's not under that name because it's on PayPal. Okay, here we go. I won't read your real name. Trust me. Biospirit of the West says for $100, Empire of Stream donation. Really enjoy listening to the test stream. Can't wait for the next one. I just finished reading The Populist Delusion. Excellent book.
Oh, Populist Delusion is such a good book. Oh man,
yes.
Just not wanting to you know,
if you guys want to get up to speed with what we're talking about, The Populist Delusion is one of the best books I have read on all of this. Let me actually, Chris, while I'm talking, will you look that up and share the link to buy The Populist Delusion in the chats, pretty please?
Yes. Well, actually, I think I still have the cover.
And while he's doing that, I want a whole bunch of emojis. Get me some white hearts and a bunch of raucous emojis, as Jason says, in the chat for Biospirit of the West for that awesome $100 donation.
Thank you very much, Biospirit of the West. Go back to the small screen. I'll put the cover up.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah, no, seriously, we will probably be covering more stuff from the Populist Delusion, because Academic Agent manages to compress a hell of a lot of stuff into a very, very readable text. And elite theory, generally speaking, is quite complicated, but it's very good. That's basically
we're going to do a series of videos on the building blocks and the facets of elite theory without getting lost in the weeds on it, just to explain what that means, because basically elite theory just explains to you why politics that you know and democracy and voting that you know is basically a fake smoke and mirrors circus to distract you from the real evil being done to us. But we'll get into that another time. So thank you so much, Biospirit of the West. Absolutely amazing donation. Thank you so much for supporting this stream series. And I look forward to more. I hope you look forward to more in the future, because we plan to do at least 6 months of this series. Now, over on Subscribestar.
Let's go back to the large cam.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. We have, okay. Oh, that was from last week. Never mind. Nothing new on Subscribestar. Over on Cash App, we have Jason Kuna, the No White Guilt guy himself. This is the author of the Go Free method that I linked in the chat.
Big ups, Jason. Thanks for coming along, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and help promote. I really appreciate it. He says for $5 thank you so much, brother. He says pristine. I could tell he really enjoyed the stream tonight, because he complimented us in the chat there. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, mate. That means a lot. I appreciate it.
Now, over on Entropy, we have some very kind donations for $10 from Spud Ruckus. Thank you, sister. She says, do we have any idea what is next? I assume collapse and rebuild. Thank you both. I wish I could do more right now. Well, your dollars are always appreciated. Thank you so much. When it comes to collapse and rebuild, I do think that the goal of the ones who are ushering in the destruction of the West, now I know that it's beating a dead horse, but when you look at the building blocks of what brought us to now, it wasn't Nazism, it wasn't fascism, it wasn't even American liberalism, it was Marxist communism. And so many of the movers and shakers in academia, in media, in Hollywood, in music, and even pornography, they were Marxist communists, and they ascribed to the West must fall for us to build utopia. And that idea has been baked into what Western liberalism has become in the last 120 years or so. So I do think that is the goal. As for what comes next, I'm not going to profess. I never pretend to be able to predict the future, but I do know that if this doesn't stop, things are definitely going to get worse, because they've been progressively getting worse for basically post 1945.
So I would be willing to make an educated guess on what comes next. There is an old saying, I believe, from Shakespeare: "The greatest plans of mice and men are gang to go awry." I think that's it. It's basically like complex plans are inherently unstable, and I think that what is going to happen is that this is all going to collapse spectacularly. And then it will be massively discredited. Look what happened to the USSR is a really, really good example, right?
Mm-hmm. Or Red China is another good example.
Or China, right? And then the people that promote this thing will be widely discredited, and there will be a circulation of elites. But more importantly, there will be a circulation in the managerial elites. It's the managerial elites, what they call in the US the deep state, that is really the important part. It is You're seeing this in the UK at the moment. Even if a leader gets in and they want to do something different, the managerial elite just ignore them. You know, you saw this with Trump. He wanted to pull troops out of Syria, and they're like, oh, yeah, they're out. Until the managerial elite is substantially discredited, by which I mean they cause a famine, or it's got to be something really, really big, or like a city burns or something like that. And then once they lose their will to live, right? Like again, what happened with communism, then we will see them being widely discredited, and then a new system will be able to form. But unfortunately,
and to dovetail off that before we move on, I'm sorry to grab it from you, but we got to wrap this up. To dovetail with that, this is why building strong communities, using the Go Free method, creating organizations like my friends to building the Old Glory Club. The reason why we want to use healthy, fresh, positive lexicon and build healthy, functional, good-looking white communities and white organizations is to court the new counter elite that will come to replace these people as they weaken and fall. Because without a people, no Caesar rises. And I'm not saying we're going to have like a revolution and a Caesar killing people, but I'm saying in the relationship of pleb, middle class, upper class leadership, there has to be a reason, a resonant energy between all of those castes. And when you have people that are building unity from the bottom up, you have people that see that and are using it in academia, using it in media, that courts counter elites to help get rid of these evil kleptocrats, these evil anti-white oligarchs, and all these other people. We need to court and have a good face with positive ideas for new elites to receive us and build a new culture and build unity going forward. So I know that was a complex answer.
Yeah,
but
I agree. We need to have an alternative vision, really, so that when the current vision is discredited, there will be an alternative vision, so that when everything collapses and they look around and they're like, well, what else could we try? There are people who are like, well, we've got some ideas. None of them have been tried, that's what I'm talking about.
Yep. The last paid chat of the night that I see, and if anyone has sent any in, nothing has shown up yet. So if I miss you this week, I'll get you next week. But the last one for tonight is from Total Blackout Painting, friend of mine who lives in Idaho. Good man. He does lots of awesome artwork. Go check him out. He has a channel. Total Blackout Painting for $20.
$20 dues. Thanks very much.
For $20 US, thank you, brother. He says, hey, Yiz, I got a bonus and I'm trying to spread it around. Thanks for raising awareness and reaching and teaching. You are loved and appreciated, sister. Don't lose hope and don't lose faith in yourself. That's a very touching thing. Thank you so much, brother. I do appreciate it. Let's get some white hearts.
White hearts in the chat, boys.
White hearts in the chat, please, for everybody that has contributed, especially Spud Ruckus and Biospirit of the West, Jason Kuna, and Total Blackout Painting, who have contributed financially for this new stream series. Thank you so much. It means a lot because this is what I do for a living now, and I will be sharing the proceeds with my man, Newsfist. So awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed the first official episode of Empire of Lies, and we will be back next week, same time, same channels. You can catch us then. And remember, guys, the lies won't last forever. I stole that from you, Jay Burden. How you like it?
Yeah, thanks very much for coming, guys.
Good night, everybody.